We've got word this morning that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will travel to Moscow on Monday and meet with Vladimir Putin on Tuesday to discuss the, quote, full range of bilateral and multilateral challenges facing the U.S. and Russia. I want to bring in the CEO of Hermitage Capital Management, Bill Browder, who is in New York to receive the American Spirit Award for citizen activism for speaking out about corruption and abuse of power. Bill, congratulations and welcome. You got a long history with Russia. Vladimir Putin has repeatedly tried to have you arrested. You have called this man a menace to the world. Yet President Trump says having a good relationship with Putin is a big positive.
So basically, Putin is running circles around us right now, and it's really frustrating to watch. I mean, just to put things in perspective, Russia has an economy the size of the state of New York. Russia's military budget is 90% less than the U.S.'s military budget, and of that 10%, 80% of it is stolen by crooks in the Putin regime. So they've got, in reality, 2% of our military budget. Yet here we have Trump meeting with Putin in Helsinki on equal footing as equal world leaders. You have Pompeo canceling his meeting with Angela Merkel to go and meet with Vladimir Putin in Moscow. And then you have Putin doing all this terrible stuff around the world. He's sending troops into Venezuela. He's sending bombers to bomb civilians in Syria. He's invading Ukraine, and we can't do anything about it.
Former Russian ambassador Michael McFaul earlier this week, to that very point, said, watch this space. Now that the president has a more compliant foreign policy team, we could very likely see the United States government pushing closer and closer to Russia.
Well, I mean, there's one very important thing that's going to prevent that, which is, first of all, you have Congress, which is a co-equal branch of government. And Congress, on any side of the aisle, is clear-eyed, hawkish about the evil that Vladimir Putin is doing. And then you also have many, many people in the U.S. government, in many jobs, who still understand what Vladimir Putin is up to. So you may have a lot of tweets, you may have some theatrics and meetings, but I don't think that in the end, this is a big ship and it's very hard to change direction.
Because President Trump was willing to talk to Putin about Mueller, but he was unwilling to talk to Mueller about Putin.
Fair enough. But when it comes to foreign policy, I just like, for example, Putin wanted to have American troops withdrawn from Syria, and Trump announced that. And Mattis quit on the back of that. But the troops are still there. They didn't withdraw the troops. When push came to shove, they didn't withdraw the troops. And so I'm not saying that Trump's instincts towards Putin are good. They're bad.
But the policy doesn't follow.
But the policy is just too hard to change in the short term. And a 4-year presidential cycle is not enough to change the policy of the United States.
All right, let's talk Rudy Giuliani. The New York Times reporting today. He is urging the government of Ukraine to investigate business involving Joe Biden's son and also to investigate the origins of the Mueller report. Rudy has said, and I want to share this quote, there's nothing illegal about it. Somebody could say it's improper, but this isn't foreign policy.
Well, so you have the person who's on television every day as Trump's mouthpiece going to Ukraine. And the Ukrainians, by the way, let's just put this in context. The Ukrainians are ready to do anything they need to do to have friendship and support from the United States. And so if you have a proxy...
So why would we believe in an investigation?
Well, so you can be guaranteed that the Ukrainians will produce whatever result anybody wants to... Any important person from the Trump regime, from the Trump administration going to Ukraine and asking them for something, they'll get the result that they asked for in any investigation that's being asked.
Don't trust the deep state. Just go to Ukraine to get the answer you're looking for. Stunning.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.